Lotus Eater's office has quite a few Zoomers, and they're not wildly optimistic about the way things are going. Indeed, this weekend a premium Hangout dropped, which is this one here, which was Harry and Rory getting into the Zoomer question. So I thought, look, I don't have a dog in this particular fight. I'm an Xennial, actually, which is the micro generation just between Gen X and millennials. And I have a house. I even remember what CFAX is. So I thought I'd lend my own considerable gravitas to this particular topic, and I would decide if Zoomers are screwed or not. So the way that I decided to go about this was empirically. I thought I'd treat this as an analyst would, and I picked an employer, a big employer, which is Tesco's, which is our version of Walmart if you are an American, or a shop if you're from anywhere else. And I decided that I would pick this because it is representative of a sort of job that everyone could go into. So it's a sort of fairly mainstream job, retail job, fair enough. And it's got different bands in it, and you can find the salaries on this website, Glassdoor, fairly easily. So I thought this would be a good start. So I started my analysis by looking at a retail assistant, which is, noble work, but sort of general dog's body in a store. You stack the shelves and so on. But perfectly honourable work, so I don't mean to knock it down, but it is.
I don't know who hasn't done it.
It is an entry level sort of position, and they pay these are slightly different numbers than the one I got, but basically 21 grand a year is what you get for doing that. So then I thought, okay, right, let's assume you've got a couple of kids. Your wife or possibly husband, depending on which way around the main breadwinner works. Let's assume they work. You work 36 hours a week, so sort of standard full-time job, and the other one works, say, 16 hours a week. So and just for the purposes of this analysis, let's say the second one earns the same as the first one. So what does that get you? Feed that into a mortgage calculator, right? And what it says is you can borrow 92 grand a year. Right, and let's assume that you've saved up half your salary, so you can afford to spend 100 grand on a property. What does that get you? Where does that sort of put you onto the property ladder? So I had a bit of a look on Rightmove for a random town, picked one, Swindon in the UK, and I found this. So this is a house in Swindon that you can buy for 100k. Let's have a look at the pictures on that.
Beautiful outside.
Yeah. So for those of you who are just listening to this, I think
beautiful outside.
Yeah. Click through, John. Rumble through. Yeah. So I think
new carpets.
An estate agent might call this a
Fixer-upper.
project.
Yeah.
Fixer-upper. Something like that. So I mean, yes, it's sort of weeds growing throughout it, and there's no wallpaper and not much in the way of carpets and yes.
Hopefully, someone died in it to leave it in this state.
Possibly several years before they were discovered, but so it's not in prime condition, but at least you can buy a house. Well, at least that was my thinking until you spotted something, didn't you?
Yeah, I've been looking for a house, so I've picked up on all these things.
Oh yes.
You want to scroll down a little bit, John? Not only already sold, but they say in here that this is an auction property.
Right. Okay.
So 100 grand was the baseline price.
Okay.
For the auction, and then whoever brought it would have brought it for a lot more because it would have gone, 110, 120, 130,
I
blah,
see.
blah, blah. And they just don't tell you what price it was sold for.
But at least in theory, you could have bought it, because it is possible.
You can see there, like, guide price 100k to 150. And that's not where it stopped.
But I mean, this is the only house I could find that these people could buy.
Yeah, well, I happen to know they could buy a one-bedroom apartment in Swindon.
Okay.
For them and their two kids.
Yeah, I ruled that out. I just wanted to go with houses, because nobody says I want to buy an apartment, do they? Also, I want to buy a house.
A one-bedroom one.
So anyway, in theory, you can get a mortgage that covers you at auction. It is possible to get them. They're hard to find, but you can get them.
I think in auction you have to pay cash as well.
No, it is possible to get. Possible to get a mortgage for auction. It's just that very few people offer them, and I don't know if people still do. But anyway, it has been a thing, and you could have potentially bought that at auction for 100k. So
if you save all your money and work very hard, this is what you could get.
Yes. So then I thought, okay, well, Tesco's retail assistant is the sort of entry level position. So let's say that you apply yourself diligently and you turn up on time and you don't steal anything and you do all the right sort of behaviours that sort of works you up the tree, and you get to assistant manager level. Well, where does that get you? Assistant manager is about 27.5k a year. So again, went to the mortgage calculators and I fed it in and I said, what does this give us? Again, assuming 2 kids and assuming a wife who earns the same but part time instead of full time, and again half your salary as a deposit. Where does that get you? Well, they're prepared to lend you £162,000 a year. Sorry, not £1,000 a year for your mortgage. Add on the deposit of 15k, and you're looking at a sort of 175. So what can you get with that? So I went to the next property, John. There you go, 170 grand property in Swindon. Let's have a scroll through this one to see what you get. Yeah,
I mean,
again,
it's better.
Well, you say it on the first picture, yeah. So it again, if you're listening, this I might also describe as a project, because again, there's no carpets. I mean, there's wallpaper, but it's from the 1960s.
Bits of the roof are missing.
Yeah, bits of the roof are missing. No fungal growth in this one, I note. So it is worth more than the other one. Yeah, so definitely. In fact, I was starting to worry. Maybe this is just how people in Swindon live.
Yeah, I had that worry too.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is normal. Maybe people in Swindon are watching this segment thinking, what's the fuss about?
I won't ruin it till you finish selling this property. I know the property to tell you about it.
So how are you going to ruin this one for me?
Well, this one's up for 170. You say?
Yep.
Except it's cash buyers only.
Ah.
So you've got to have 170 grand in cash.
Okay, that's because the kitchen's ripped out and you can't get a mortgage on something that doesn't have a kitchen or a bathroom.
I don't know.
Yeah,
but that's
you can get around the auction thing. You can't get around the kitchen and the bathroom thing.
So if you're a Zoomer, what do you got to save? How many years? So you get 170 grand in cash?
It's going to be a while.
Yeah.
Right.
So the thing I want to tell you about, there was actually another property I saw. I don't know, it must be about a month back. I was looking around. 200 grand in Swindon, centre on Manchester Road.
Okay.
Which, for anyone who knows Swindon, is where a local man tried to behead his ex-girlfriend not too long ago.
Oh, is that the bit of town that I have to drive through in order to get here? The area that
there's a lot of
how do I describe it? It's enriched.
Very enriched.
Yes.
Anyway,
I know the one.
So this property, I found it there. I looked at it. It was covered in mold everywhere. The weirdest thing though was that there's the toilet. Okay, and then in front of where your feet would be when you're on the toilet, it was just missing. You could look straight down into the front room. I was just like, when did that break? And when did they just leave it? Whoever lived
and they just thought, yeah,
I'll just say hi to my mum while I'm doing my business.
Right. Okay.
200 grand.
Right. Anyway, so back to Tesco's. Let's assume that you climb the greasy pole all the way to the top and you become a store manager. You're now on 40 grand.
How old are you by this point?
I don't know. Maybe you could make a store manager by your early 30s. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, if you keep your nose clean, yeah, you could do that. So you're on 40 grand a year. Seems reasonable. So again, I did the whole thing. Wife who works same salary. Half the number of hours, 2 kids, 20 grand deposit this time because you can save a bit more, and you got this thing. So I mean that is finally reasonable. I mean, that's just a normal sort of semi-detached house, and it has carpets and walls, and
it's considered highly luxurious.
Yeah, I mean that seems that is perfectly reasonable. So congratulations if you're the person trying to sell this house and we're plugging it to 300,000 people. You're bound to get a taker, because I think that's a nice house. So you're doing perfectly well, right? So then basically I started thinking to myself, okay, so it is just about possible if you're a Zoomer to get a house. It can happen. It's just a bit difficult. So let's compare this to past generations. And I found this website, Love Property, UK house prices from the year you were born to today. And if you scroll through, it's just a whole load of different years and the house prices at the time and what it is in today's money. So anyway, I thought let's pick a number of case studies. So I decided to pick people born in 1956. If you were born in 1956, by the way, you basically won the demographic lottery, because you got the maximum amount of wage growth over your lifetime, plus you get the maximum amount of benefits from the pension system and all that kind of stuff. So 1956, you're doing well. So let's say you wanted to buy a house when you turned 21, which was not unreasonable back then. You would have been turning 21 in 1977. In 1977, that was the year that this website tells us that the king of rock and roll died on the toilet, presumably not speaking to his mum at the time. And, the average house price then was 13 grand, right, which is £81,000 in today's money. So there has been, and that would be for an average house as well, which would probably be a bit like the last one that we saw there, a 3-bed semi, something along those lines with the garden.
Not covered in mold.
Yes. So £81,000 in today's money. Then I thought, okay, what if you're Gen X? What if you're born in 1974? You might be trying to buy your house in 1995. That was the year that O.J. Simpson went to trial. Of course, we now know that he was innocent, and and the average house price then was 51 grand, which is apparently 100 grand in today's money. So, yep, that seems, again, not too bad. You can get around that. Okay, what about if you're a millennial? What if you were born in 1988, and so you would have turned 21 in 2009? Well, according to this website, that was the year that, not according to this website, I remember it as well. This was the year that Barack Obama came into the White House, and back then, house prices were 156, which is 214 in today's money. So, a considerable jump up from Gen X to millennials. And then my final case study, before I start trying to make this interesting, which was Zoomers. Let's say you're born in 2001, so you're turning 21 now, and the house prices are 294,000 for an average house, or in today's money, 294.
But that's the whole country.
Yes.
Because remember, of course,
yes,
if you live in the south,
yeah, it includes the north where nobody lives. Yeah,
yeah, and Scotland and
Yes.
and Northern Ireland and Wales and God forbid Cornwall. But if you live in the south, like, it gets even worse. It goes up to 300 something.
Oh yes, much worse.
What I'm gonna let you in on a thing I know.
Go on,
This is my escape plan.
Right.
So there's a place in England called Copeland. Sounds like a meme, right?
Really?
Yeah, it's next to the Lake District.
Right.
Houses there. Okay, you
Right.
can get like a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom house, 80 grand.
Oh,
Like it's the 50s still. Just because nobody bloody lives there. Nobody
Right.
wants to live there.
there's
But
a big asbestos mine at the top of the hill blowing all over the.
I don't know, but
Right.
every graph of like every province in England, how's the
Yes.
house prices changed. Copeland just like ignored the economy and has
Right.
just stayed like it's the 1950s.
Oh, brilliant!
So I am
right.
actually-
Okay.
Like I don't know what's there. Presumably Mordor, but I don't know. At least you could buy some. So that's my escape plan. I just find it funny that your
Very
example
promising.
of what you could buy in the 50s, or 60s,
Yeah.
is exactly what is available only in Copeland. That has seemed to have just like.
Well, not now. You've just blagged it on a sort of major podcast.
Right,
but-
no one else buy it. Come around
Okay.
your house.
So anyway, so then I had a theory. I thought, okay, well, let's look at population in relation to house prices. So I found this website, Macro Trends, and so again, my case studies. In 1977, the population was 56 million, and then for our Gen Xers, when they came of age, it was 58 million. When the millennials came of age, it was 63 million, and current day is apparently 68 million. Okay, that's interesting. Right, then I looked at the amount of migration to try and explain what's going on here. Now, net migration over those times, again, for the boomers, when they came of age, net migration was, for every 1,000 people, the net migration in that particular year was 0.2 of a person. And actually, it fluctuates either side of the line. So some years it was below, some, there's net people leaving, and some people it was above. For the X generation, when they came of age, it was 1 person per 1,000. For the millennials, when house prices significantly shot up, net migration per person was 7. A significant increase, and apparently officially today it's at 2.5. So that might explain that big spike up, right? Then I looked at population density. I won't bore you with the numbers, but anyway, I got a whole list of the population densities, and then I thought to myself, well, actually, I seem to remember when I was working in a finance role, it was a bit of an open secret. Actually, the population of the country was significantly higher than the official numbers. I'm going to steer you towards this article from City AM. This is something that went up the once, or no, this was the Independent. Sorry. So this is an article that went up once and then never saw the light of day again. It got sort of suitably crushed, and this is basically a financial journalist who's been speaking to a whole bunch of food corporations. I'll explain what I mean by this, but he basically thinks that the population, in fact, well, he doesn't think this, he's been told by multiple sources, that the population of Britain back in 2007 was at least 77 million, if more like 80,000. Let me read from the article. So, my source for the above statements are good, but scared of admitting the truth for fear of incurring the wrath of Whitehall. It's like the best way of monitoring illegal drug consumption. Forget the pious statements from ministers. The foolproof method is to sample our water and effluents in it. That's easily the best way of monitoring what the nation has been consuming. And he also looks at the consumption side. Based on what we eat, one big supermarket chain reckons there are at least 80 million people living in the UK. The demand for food is a reliable indicator. As Sir Richard Branson says, you can have all the money in the world, but you can only eat one lunch and one dinner. The supermarket in question was privately lobbying the Competition Commission to let it grow its market share. The argument went, reasonably enough, that if the market was far bigger than the regulator realised, so expanding the network was fair. I have a second respectable source, well, third if you count the effluent processor. A major non-commercial agricultural institution reckons there are 77 million of us in the UK. Again, its reckoning is based on what we eat. David Bulk, a money manager and broker with BCG Partners, he was talking of 1 million Eastern Europeans unaccounted for in London last week on television. I suspect he's right, although he's got conservative estimates. So anyway, so he's basically describing how he's getting multiple sources from companies whose job it is to know how many total people there are in the UK from feeding them, and saying that the population is significantly higher. So if I did that and then I rework those density assumptions, then I think that it starts to become a little bit more explainable how we got here. But then I thought, okay, what I can then do is, what if I expressed house prices as a function of population density? So I plugged in these new numbers, and the ratio between population density and house prices suddenly smooths out a lot after, because you get the boomers, then you get the Gen X, and then you get the millennials. Suddenly that all smooths out. And if I apply the same numbers today, it strongly suggests that there are 91 million people living in the UK today.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Against an official population of 68 million.
Should I give you a fourth indicator of that as
well? Go
on
then.
The one used in UKIP all the time was toilet paper sales.
Ah, yes.
Because again,
you've only got one arse to wipe.
Maybe the occasional house gets TP'd, but that's about all you're really doing.
Yep.
So it was a pretty good indicator of, things are bad.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. So, I mean, I will just, if there are any olds watching this, I would ask you this question. Does it really feel like, and these are the official numbers, but there are 20% more people living in the UK today than in 1977? Now, I don't remember 1977 because I wasn't born then, but I do remember the 80s, and it does not feel like there was 20% more people. It feels like my numbers that I've just sort of computed above, it feels like 50% is closer to the number. But if you are an old person watching this, do comment down below and let me know if you think that 20% or 50% is more likely. Now, what does this mean for us? I'm going to throw you up what a US demographer has been talking about in relation. So this is in relation to the US, but it's the same logic. Let's listen to this.
I talked about the new misery in the United States and things like the deaths of despair. It took our health sciences economy a decade and a half to realize that the poor whites were killing themselves in these tragic new ways. This problem of slower improvements in educational attainment has been in our face for almost 40 years, and so far as I can tell, not more than a handful of economists and educators have even noticed it. I do not have the answer for why it has happened. I can tell you where it is happening. The epicenters are native-born Americans, native-born American men, native-born American Anglo men. There's a big overlap with the deaths of despair problem.
So he's basically, that whole interview is him going into the massive rise, deaths of despair of natively born white men in America. I don't think we've got quite the same sort of level of sort of suicide and despair in this country. We haven't had the same opioid crisis here, but I certainly suspect there's a lot of the despair. He then goes on later in the interview to talk about how basically these social insurance programs have basically simply gone far too high. It's something that I talk about on Brokeconomics all the time, about how it's a Ponzi scheme, how you can't possibly support the number of people that are retiring today, because basically the boomers were a very large population, and the Zoomers are a small generation, and the Zoomers trying to support the boomers in retirement is basically not going to function. Let's have a look at his second clip where he goes into that aspect a bit more.
We've got a kind of a Ponzi scheme problem on our hands. And as you indicated, Peter, as long as you've got a growing base to the pyramid in relation to the recipient peak, you can be pretty generous. When things flip around, you get whipsawed really fast. We do not seem to have any appetite in either political party for balancing our budget and controlling our national finances the way we would with our household budgets. And we have gotten into the very dangerous habit of borrowing to pay for current consumption.
So the sums don't add up anymore. It's causing despair. It's not going to work. Let's now turn to this article, which I think was quite apropos. It's basically saying that the overtaxed young really might as well flee. Now, there's a couple of interesting points on here which chimes very clearly with me and this whole thesis of Zoomers. The UK is continuing its miserable drift towards becoming statist and interventionist. As of this summer, a staggering 3.5 million Brits were on out-of-work benefits. Far from doing anything to end this scandal, Hunt is sent a clear message: you'll be better off relying on the contribution of taxpayers than working for themselves. Now, despite empty promises of fiscal conservative, this government spending as a percentage of GDP is now 30% higher than it was 22 years ago under Tony Blair. Hunt is throwing yet more billions at our NHS, despite there being record 7 million people waiting on it, and it's gone up considerably since then. Then there's home ownerships. Our home of owning a home are being dashed by NIMBYs, reluctant local councils, and governments too cowardly to do anything about them. This is the rise of the anti-growth coalition that Liz Truss warned us about. Now, I've often said that Liz Truss, she wasn't particularly bright, but she was basically right directionally about all of this stuff. The article finishes off by saying, Hunt is committed to intergenerational theft. There's no other way of looking at it. We're being plunged into an economic decline as a result of this government's reckless borrowing and spending, as well as its addiction to failed Brownite economic model. So, yes, it's not great. I wanted to sort of have a look at when this might turn around for the Zoomers, again, going by the lens of demographics. Now, the thing with the boomers is there was basically two peaks in population. The second, much greater peak was in 1963. Now, I don't want to be too dark about this, but you combine that with average life expectancy in this country for 60-year-olds, which is 84 for men and 87 for women. And what it basically means is that by the year 2047, there's going to be a lot of very reasonably priced 4-bedroom detached houses with nice gardens coming on the market.
It's nice to have a date.
Yes.
It's nice to finally know.
Yes. Now, that's quite good for me because my kids will be in their early 30s then, and you know how it goes a bank of mum and dad. So it's not going to be so cumbersome for me. But if you're a Zoomer born in, say, 2001, you're going to be 46 by the time that rolls around. So there is going to be a bit of a wait. And it's not like you can vote your way out of this because boomers still utterly dominate politics and they're not going to vote away their gifts. They're not going to vote away their sort of pension entitlements and all the rest of it.
There's no reason they should either.
Yeah. And, you can leave the country, at least until vax passports are made a thing and that is stopped. So yes, I'm going to come down on the same side as the weekend segment that, in fact, yes, Zoomers are utterly screwed. Do want to give a somewhat more positive note. I mean, living standards are higher than they've ever been, so there is that. There's something. Access to information is higher than it's ever been.
It feels kind of desperate when you're just like, well,
importantly,
bike brakes pretty good.
Entertainment is better than it's ever been. No, and that genuinely does matter. Because if you are a Zoomer, you have no idea how boring Sundays used to be, right? And also winter, and also basically every part of the week that wasn't Friday or Saturday night.
You had to own VHSs.
Yes, like you must have noticed. Like
you had a wall with VHSs.
Every time you walk into town with Carl, we get to the bottom of town, and he'd be like, "Oh, this used to be buzzing this area on a Friday and Saturday night 20 years ago," and he gets all misty-eyed and reminiscent of it. You know, there were people who used to live for the weekend, and Zoomers don't have to worry about that. So entertainment. Life expectancy. Yes, you've got the highest life expectancy of any generation, and so chin up. Don't be sad. It's good on many fronts. You're just not going to have a house.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this episode on Did We Domesticate Ourselves? you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow it on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.